Welcome to the Outrage Science Bites podcast, a companion podcast to the Outrage Overload podcast. This is day 17 of the NaPodPoMo challenge. That's National Podcast Post Month, which is a challenge to produce 30 episodes in 30 days for the month of November. So with Outrage Science Bites, I'm releasing one episode every day for the month of November. So today's episode, we're going to talk about a phenomenon known as anchoring. So what this is a phenomenon where initial information, particularly if it has numbers, influence our subsequent judgment and decisions. So let me give an exact or a concrete example sort of related to outrage, and say an example of outrage media, or at least a clickbait headline. So let's say you go to an article with the headline that claims the new tax plan will double your income taxes. So that clickbait headline is obviously designed to evoke fear and anger. And it immediately becomes an anchor for us. You know, that we may form an initial judgment about the tax plan on this headline, even before we've read the article or considered opposing viewpoints. Because it triggered that shocking statistics of doubling our income taxes, and that triggered our fears of financial hardship, we are now more receptive to information, and we may form a negative opinion of the tax plan, even if when you actually dive into the article, maybe it did provide a more nuanced and balanced perspective. But that headline, caused the anchoring effect. And it illustrates how anchoring can be used in outrage media to manipulate public opinion. By presenting an emotionally charged, an attention-grabbing piece of information, media outlets can anchor their audience perceptions, making them more likely to accept subsequent information that aligns with the anchor, even if it's misleading or inaccurate. It's typically misleading, but sometimes flat out inaccurate. So the power of anchoring is particularly evident in this realm of outrage media. The deliberately inflammatory content that's designed to evoke strong emotions, typically anger or fear or moral outrage. That emotional arousal primes our brains to accept information more readily, making us more susceptible to anchoring effects. The outrageous headline or statistic we encounter first becomes the anchor, shaping our understanding of the issue, even if it's based on incomplete or misleading information. So the consequences of anchoring, like many of the things we talk about here, play a role in affective polarization. It can lead to entrenchment of opposing viewpoints. It can make constructive dialogue and compromise increasingly difficult. These anchored judgments can fuel confirmation bias, another cognitive bias that we talked about, and we talk about a lot here and on the Outrage Overload podcast, because it causes us to seek out information that reinforces those existing beliefs from the anchor, while disregarding information that challenges them. And that creates our echo chambers, where we're surrounded by voices that validate our anchored perceptions, further reinforcing polarization. And like a lot of the things we've talked about on this podcast and on the Outrage Overload podcast, to combat the influence of anchoring, we have to cultivate a culture of critical thinking and also media literacy. So that involves questioning the source of information, evaluating its credibility, and seeking out diverse perspectives. And we must also be mindful of the emotional impact of the information we consume, recognizing that strong emotions can cloud our judgment and make us more susceptible to anchoring effects. And then, again, in addition to the individual efforts, we also need to hold media outlets accountable for their use of anchoring techniques. This requires promoting ethical journalism practices, encouraging transparency in information presentation, and calling out instances of deliberate manipulation. And we also need to support initiatives that promote media literacy education, equipping individuals with the skills to recognize and resist anchoring effects. And one of those initiatives is the Connors Institute, which is the Outrage Overload podcast is a Connors Institute podcast. And you can find that at connorsinstitute.org, and there are a lot of resources there for related to media literacy. So we'll end that we'll end this episode there. Anchoring is another one of these cognitive biases that can subtly influence our political judgments and decisions and fuel affective polarization, among other things. So if you like these kinds of episodes, or if you like these episodes, you may enjoy the long-form Outrage Overload podcast, where we speak with scientists, authors, researchers, real experts that can tell you about these kinds of things and other things related to outrage in society, outrage in politics, and how we can lower the temperature. So check that out at outrageoverload.net. That is also where you can find past episodes of these Outrage Science Bites episodes. If you scroll down at outrageoverload.net, you can find Outrage Science Bites at the bottom, and you can click that link and go in and find all the episodes there. And another thing I'd ask you to do is at the bottom of that Outrage, also near the bottom of that outrageoverload.net website, is a place to actually submit a voice message. You can leave me a voice message directly, and trust me, I listen to every single one, and I'd love to hear from you. You can also email me directly, outrageoverload@gmail.com. If there's anything you'd like to see me talk about for these last 15 days or whatever 14 days that are left of this Outrage Science Bites challenge in November, let me know, or even if that may go beyond the challenge. But if you have something that you'd like me to talk about for the challenge, just drop me an email and I'll try to work it in. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.